I have one large Napa cabbage here that I've cleaned, and I'm going to slice it in large chunks. Now, this is a preference thing. If you would like whole leaves, whole leaf kimchi, of course, keep it whole, but I find it easier to eat when it's chopped roughly. So I'm going to do that. Like I always say, make it to your preference. Since you're the one that's going to be eating it, make it the way you like. I'm just simply showing what I do. I've chopped up half of it. I have the other half here. And at this stage, I'm going to salt this amount because I find it easier to mix if I salt it in layers. And you want to generously salt this because in the brining process, the salt plus the filtered water is going to break this down and make it very malleable and wilted. So if you don't adequately salt it, that process is not going to happen nicely. Use more than you probably think you need. And the amount, by the way, is going to depend on the weight of the cabbage. So it's going to be different each time. The more and more you make fermented vegetables at home, you'll find your own rhythm and you can always adjust it accordingly. So in the brining stage, you want to use adequate salt. And I just eyeball it because I've had a lot of experience fermenting my vegetables at home. I've been doing this for years. So like I said, in learning, you will learn by doing is what I'm trying to say. This is the first layer salted, and I'm going to chop up the remaining half and put it on top. All right, so I've chopped the rest of the cabbage. It's filled this bowl, and I'm just going to salt the remainder of it. Once you make your own homemade fermented vegetables, be it sauerkraut or kimchi, you will never buy store-bought again because number one, it's so economical. Number two, it's fun to make. It's a productive activity that you get to consume afterwards. You can feel proud of making your own food. And the third reason is because the taste is so much more superior to commercial store-bought kimchi. Nothing beats homemade kimchi, so I encourage you to make your own. And I know many of you already do make your own sauerkraut and kimchi, which is fantastic. Fermented vegetables are part of my daily diet, so I never run out. Now I'm going to pour some filtered water on top just to barely cover it. And it will continue to wilt in this salt water brine. So I'm going to let this brine for 2 hours, and then I will come back and resume the process. It's been about 2.5 hours that my Napa cabbage has been brining, and as you can see, it has shrunk, or rather wilted down because of the salt water, and it becomes extremely tender, and you can feel this with your hand when you make it, and it looks just perfect right now. So I have rinsed this in cold water to get most of the brine off, and now we come to the seasoning portion. So this is the part where you can do it to your preference, of course. So to this, I am going to add scallions. I like large chunks of vegetable in my kimchi personally. So I leave things pretty rustic. And then the so-called food for the fermentation process, this is about 1/2 of a small Asian pear. This will provide the natural sugar for the food, for the bacteria, and that creates the fermentation process. So you can use carrots, you can use kiwi fruit, You can use a pear, an apple, a Fuji apple, for instance, or a Honeycrisp apple. I like Asian pear, so that's what I'm going to use. And the trick to this is I use a cheese grater and I grate this in. And the reason I grate it is because having it grated creates a thicker kimchi, more substantial, less watery kimchi as the end product, which I personally prefer. And it's very delicious. And while I have my grater handy, I'm going to take my peeled and frozen ginger. If you know me, you know me. I always keep frozen, clean, peeled ginger in my freezer. It's a cooking hack that it's excellent because it's always ready to use. So I'm going to, it grates really nicely too. I'm going to grate about 1.5 inches worth maybe. Frozen ginger just is such a good thing to have always in the freezer, ready to go. I'm never without it because I consume ginger every day in some form or another. One of the superfoods. And then I have about 7 cloves of garlic because I love garlic. You can use more or less, of course, depending on your preference, but in my opinion, if kimchi is not garlicky and gingery, it's not as satisfying. I always have cleaned, peeled garlic in my freezer, ready to go. It's ready there when I need it, instead of the other way around, so I always have it in my freezer. This is a good arm workout too. I'm not joking. Almost done. Let's not waste anything. Lastly, or not lastly, but lastly for the vegetables, I have this chunk of, this is Korean daikon radish. So you can use anything you like, or you can omit this completely. I like to have some cubes of, this just adds some substance, I find, to the kimchi and variance in texture. Also, radishes are extremely healthy for you, so as is kimchi in general, but radishes have many health benefits, so I like to consume them. And I like to do this because I often can't make up my mind whether I want radish kimchi or Napa, so I often mix it and make a combination kimchi, if you will. So that's it. Okay, so of course you cannot make kimchi without the Korean crushed red pepper. The amount of crushed red pepper powder you use is going to be dependent on how spicy you like it. And I like my kimchi to be radioactively spicy. A lot of people say that they have a sweet tooth. I have a spicy tooth, so perhaps a product of my upbringing or my bloodline or both, nature and nurture. I like spicy kimchi, so I like it to be borderline uncomfortable when I'm eating it. So don't judge me, because I know how much I like. And then the last step is I'm going to sprinkle some salt, because I rinsed this, of course. I rinsed most of the brine off, and so I need to re-salt it. Not a lot, but my advice would be you want to put a little bit more salt than you probably think you need, because nothing is worse than bland kimchi. Trust me, nothing is worse than doing this and then not salting it adequately and having it turn out bland. Now comes the mixing. So I have my glove and Hopefully you can see this. I'm doing my best, so bear with me. You just want to massage this and make sure that all the components are incorporated. And the first time you do this at home, I think this part is the most exciting step because it really starts to resemble a store-bought product, except you made it yourself. So as you can see, this entire process, it could not be simpler. So this is why I encourage everyone to not only incorporate fermented foods into your diet if you're not already eating them on a daily basis, be it kimchi or sauerkraut, kefir, something fermented every day should go in your body. This is mixed. So the last step is obviously to put it into jars. After I put this into the jars, I'm going to store them in my kitchen at room temperature in a dark, cool place away from sunlight. And I'm going to leave the jars there for a few days to ferment. You want to continually press it down very firmly. Use your muscles and very firmly press it down. And you don't want to fill it to the top, to the very top, I should say. You want to leave a few inches at the top for it to expand because, of course, as it ferments, it will start to basically come alive. And if you pack it too full, it can actually explode. We don't want that. So leave a few inches at the top for the fermentation to take place properly, and so that you don't make a mess in your kitchen. I'm speaking from experience, of course. I've made many messes in my kitchen, so take my word. All right, I'm going to pack it down very firmly. And the length of time that you ferment this will depend on, again, your preference. How sour or funky do you want it to be? I have experimented with all lengths of time, 24 hours, 72 hours, as long as a week. My advice would be to intermittently taste it. Taste it as you go. So after like 24 hours, take a little taste and see if it's to your liking. It probably won't be at 24 hours, but after 2 days at room temperature fermenting, you can taste it and see if it's sour enough. If it's not, leave it an additional 24 hours. Leave it for 5 days. It's all going to depend on your preference. So don't be scared to taste it. That's how you learn. It's not necessary to learn always with the mind. We learn more by doing, by experiencing. So I want to encourage you to, when you're doing these homemade projects, such as home fermentation, approach it with curiosity and excitement that you are making something to consume, that you're making something that you could easily buy, of course, but that your version will be better in every single way, I promise. This is something you can be proud of at the end because you will love it and your family will love it. It's all done now. And I'm just going to clean up the jar slightly just to appease my in the interest of being tidy. Place the lid on. And I'm going to screw the lid on, but I'm not going to put it too tightly. So I will unscrew it a little bit because that again will let that will prevent any mess from happening. And by the way, Fermented foods continue to ferment in the refrigerator. However, it's just a much slower process once you refrigerate it. So they will continue because this is a preserved food after all. So good luck with this if you attempt to make it, or if you are a seasoned kimchi maker at home, share your tips and tricks down below and we can all learn from each other. So I wish you the best of luck, health, and success in your kimchi making and other areas of your life too. Thank you for watching.